always he's got that gospel heart, and he loves the Lord, and he's looking forward to Christ in all these different prophecies.
Could I ask a question, please, sir? Why did you invite me here today when you got him?
Well, I regard you're both wonderful Bible scholars, and I learn from both of you. And it's lovely to be looking at these first 5 chapters, which really form our first study. Actually, of course, in our study guide here, which viewers may want to get hold of. Perhaps you already got one of these study guides on Isaiah. In this first section, first 5 chapters, how should we understand these first 5 chapters, Alec? I mean, they have no historical details. So what's going on here?
Well, I can only tell you how I understand them. Every author who writes a book writes an author's preface in which he sets the scene. And I think that's the function of these first 5 chapters. You see, Isaiah doesn't tell us of his call to be a prophet until chapter 6. No, so in many ways, chapter 6 of the book as we have it is chapter 1 of the book as Isaiah saw it. And the first 5 chapters are scene-setting chapters.
It's like really when you have a film, that often they start halfway through to put you in the picture.
Yeah.
Is that kind of idea?
That's the idea.
I understand.
And is it fair to say that is what he's doing? Because really a lot of it is just talking about all the problems. Is that what he's doing? He's
That's
sort
right.
of just saying...
Well, he's putting down a backdrop. This is the situation into which I came. This is what things were like when I was called to be a prophet. And ultimately, this is why I'm writing my book. Because this is the situation that I'm trying to tackle.
I understand. And of course the context is one of, well, I suppose you could say that there are 5 great themes that these prophets were taking contemporary with Isaiah as well. They all seem to talk about the special relationship between God and his people, unbreakable, but then how Israel and Judah have broken the relationship, that's second. Thirdly, how God therefore visits judgment upon his people, particularly through hostile nations like Assyria and Babylon. Fourthly, how those very nations themselves come under judgment for their wickedness. And then last of all, of course, as we shall see in Isaiah, I'm sure, how that God's mercy and protection extends towards his people in terms of restoration.
Well, you see, that's all in chapters 1 to 5, in embryo.
Yes.
Because that is to say, until you get to chapter 5.
Yes.
In chapters 1 to 4, the note of hope is constantly there. Sometimes it's concealed. In chapter 1, he says in verse 26, I will restore you as at the first, which is a concealed way of saying I'm bringing David back. Because David was the first to settle in Zion and make it his capital city. I'm bringing David back. And then, of course, you get the marvelous poetic lyrical passage at the beginning of chapter 2 about beating swords into plowshares, that passage, and the equally poetic passage in chapter 4 of the Lord coming to dwell in Zion. So there's this constantly, our eyes are lifted up to hope. And as we'll say, I think many times on our way through Isaiah, it's an undated hope. Therefore it acts for the people of God in the same way as the second coming. It's something you say, it's imminent, it can happen today, it might happen tomorrow, we'll wait for it.
Yes.
And in the meantime, the hope will bear us up.
And yet, of course, in these opening chapters, in this opening chapter here, it looks as though hope is dashed. I mean, I'm looking, Paul, at, verses 11 to 15.
Yeah.
Here, your new moon festivals, your appointed feasts, my soul hates. They become a burden to me, says God. I'm weary of hearing them. That is your prayers. So why does the Lord condemn the temporal sacraments and sacrifices and the festivals of the law?